Learning styles, mythical and misinterpreted. Only 2% of teachers thought that teaching children in their preferred learning styles could improve learning outcomes. This is an idea prevalent in education today. Lots of teachers are instructed to teach and differentiate instruction according to the learning style of the learner. This approach is commonly justified in terms of brain function, despite educational and scientific evidence demonstrating that the learning style approach is not helpful, nor is there any scientific evidence proving that it is effective. However, what we do know to be true about learning styles is that there are some. There are 7 main learning styles, and they have different, because people have different strengths. They clearly learn better, either visually, kinesthetically, oral, verbal, mathematical, interpersonal, and intrapersonally. However, with this being said, where is the truth in that, and where lies the learning style myth? Well, we do know that people are different and that these differences affect the way that they learn. Some have special needs and abilities and gifts. Intelligence come in various levels and forms. We also know that people have different interests. And when someone is interested in a subject, chances are they're going to learn more in that area because of their motivation. Being a teacher of 8 years, I have noticed that the biggest impact on learning is not having it taught in their learning style, but is whether they are interested in the subject matter itself or making the lesson involve the subject matter of interest of the student that you're teaching. Background is another indicator of when a learner learns or not. We know that learners have diverse backgrounds and something that undoubtedly affects their learning. Being in a rural community, I know that if a student comes to me not having ate that day or knowing that their parents are going through a divorce, that it doesn't matter if I present the material to them orally when they are an oral learner, or auditorily if they're an auditorily learner, or visually. It's only going to matter whether they're ready to learn. 4, last but not least, there are people with various learning disabilities. Now, the learning theories are going to suggest that someone who is blind learns better, not visually, but auditorily, and this only makes sense because they cannot see. Learning disabilities would also prevent somebody who is dyslexic from learning the best way through reading. However, it's because of their disability and not their learning style. Daniel Williams, psychologist, says that it's important to be clear that learning styles is not a theory of instruction. It's a theory of how the mind works. So we can present material through different ways of instruction, but the mind is going to grasp onto things that its strengths are in. So when I say there's no evidence for learning styles, Williams states, I am making a claim that about the mind, not about instruction. Lots of stuff aside from learning styles goes into the practice of teaching. Another psychological proof that learning styles is a myth is found in dual coding. Dual coding is when it takes 2 parts of the brain to analyze a piece of information and take it in, showing that someone can auditorily see something and visually, or so auditorily hear something and visually see something, and both sides need to communicate, and both learning styles need to be effective in order to take in the information. And they will do so more effectively than if only one is shown. As you can see in this scenario, if a Prezi or a PowerPoint is given with long sentences or paragraphs, the learner might not take in all of the educational information, even if they are a visual learner. And they will, and scientific research has proven that dual coding is more effective when there are limited words and limited pictures working together. Dual coding demystifies the myth of learning styles. So what are the facts then? To debunk myths, we must consider that 1, there is no convincing evidence to prove that when an instructor changes the presentation of the learning style, that the students are actually learning better. And 2, there is no better or faster learning as an outcome implementing individual preference into a course. It's just a style that ultimately makes no difference in learning. 3, instructors should not just take under consideration the learning styles of their students, but their backgrounds and their interests. And 4, content is the parameter that should directly affect the mood of presentation, not the learning style of the students. So in demystifying this whole learning style and consider the learning style to the student, I think what's more important, and based on all the research of Benedict Carey and Williams, is that we are going to look at what we're presenting and then consider which learning style best fits the material we're presenting. We're not going to teach geography more in a kinesthetic way than in a visual way. We're certainly not going to teach people how to read by looking at pictures. 5, definitely more efficient to create a course based on the motivational characteristics of the student. So we want to know what motivates them to learn. And this is going to enable them to learn faster rather than considering their learning style that they prefer. Perpetual learning has to do with senses, and there is nothing restrictive about it. It doesn't prove that someone is a specific learner. It merely suggests that people have preferred learning styles. 7, not all learning happens the same way, nor should teaching. What's crucial is to decide which techniques are best for which learning outcomes and not the customizing a base based on learning styles. And finally, 8, we mostly think of learning styles as de facto without questioning their true value, purpose, and relevance. And the truth is that there is no correlation between learning styles and successful learning. Successful learning takes place when we mentioned all of the above information in the second slide. So what does this mean for educators? Well, in Benedict's How We Learn, we learn that the brain retains information just as uniquely as it retrieves it. Taking in information is just as complicated as identifying how well we learn it. So learning styles is not going to be the be-all, end-all in educational delivery of information. It should just be something that you consider. Conclusion is, don't single out one learning technique to teach. As Scott Lilienfeld and colleagues write in the 50 Great Myths of Popular Psychology, the approach encourages teachers to teach students intellectual strengths rather than their weaknesses. Yet, they add, students need to correct and compensate for their shortcomings, not avoid them. So if we just teach to a certain strength of a student, a learning style per se, then what kind of help are we giving them for the future when they go into a classroom when somebody doesn't necessarily teach to their learning style? The overall objective of teaching information is to get students to learn it and to consider which and best way that will happen. However, if we handicap them by only delivering information in one of the learning styles, then it's not going to benefit them in the long run. Here are the references. So overall, in my studies, I have found that learning style is a myth and that we need to approach our teaching considering neuroscience and the information that it offers. It's unbelievable to me that such a huge pedagogical way of teaching is still accepted when there isn't any background scientific proof that this is at all effective. I think the confusion lies therein that we have different learning styles. It shouldn't be the be-all, end-all of how to teach it. So teachers do realize that learning styles are real, and so do scientists. And that's confusing because if they're real, then why not cater to those learning styles and teach to them? Well, it's just about the content and what kind of learning style matches the content you're delivering, not exactly the way the student is learning. Thank you.